to another Boiler.Room Collections today with Raime, the production duo who's just had an album out on Black Is Never Black. It was the second album.
Second record, yeah.
On the same label, isn't it?
Same label.
And today, slightly different to what we've done with previous collections, I guess. We just kind of sort of semi-dissect the influences of the record, right?
Yeah.
You guys, as we were just sort of talking earlier today, have been collecting records for like 20 odd years.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess where were you for a lot of that time? Like you've worked in like record stores or like a lot.
I mean, you know,
previously
worked in the industry for like, the music industry in loads of different ways for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I've always been in the UK. I've always been sort of in and around the south. We grew up in Reading together. And then moved to Brighton and then moved to London. So, you know, we've always been close to London. London's obviously heavily influenced what we've been into really for the majority of that time. So, yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, what have you got lined up first, and how does it sort of relate to how you set about with the latest album, Tooth?
The first record is by Capone and Noriega. It's off their album War Report. It's called Parole Violators, and really like this record is kind of reflects an area of hip hop that we both got particular love for. It's kind of like New York, mid-90s, pretty gritty, pretty kind of real. I guess part of it, I guess you could call kind of gangster or kind of street, but really it's the production on it that we've got such affinity with. I mean, when we were sort of really young, like 15 or so, like the first records we were buying got heavily into Mo-Wax, got heavily into like really, I guess you could call it early trip hop.
Mm-hmm.
But really it was kind of like the first time I'd heard very atmospheric music being mixed with beats, really.
Yeah.
And at that age it had a huge influence, still has a huge influence actually. But when we were coming back to make this record, kind of started remembering those kind of things again, and really like the first record was very much being influenced by kind of grand, very narrative based kind of sounds, and very sort of, well, you know, like a journey for example. And I guess this time around we kind of went back to loops.
Yeah.
And loops have always influenced the way that we've made music. They influenced the first record, but yeah, I think we kind of just wanted to get back to that style of making music, and obviously throughout dance music and a lot of our influences, loops are, you know, essential to the whole point of the way the record's made. But you know, hip hop is certainly one of the places where we started, where loops first made sense. You know, they kind of the power of them was the first time where you kind of subconsciously, without kind of knowing it, you kind of really locked in to the idea of a loop. And hip hop is such a sort of powerful way that it uses it, and usually there's little periods of breaks in it, and then there'll be, you know, a big nice looped heavy chunky sample to get your ears around, and it'll go back to very stripped raw drums and bass. And yeah, it was that we kind of, you know, were getting excited about again. So we, you know, kind of went back to that area, and New York, that particular period, you know, there's lots of Havoc from Mobb Deep's obviously another huge influence for us. It's like, you know, it's just that raw, dry, atmospheric sound that they get, and the tones of the records, they're always kind of like the ones that we particularly love. They've always just got this, I mean, it's difficult to use the word darkness. I'm trying to avoid it, really.
Yeah. I mean, when we were speaking earlier, you were saying, as people have sort of, other people, journalists have dissected the record, they've said a lot that it's dark, but I think that is perhaps an aspect of the new record that would relate to the sort of New York of that time. It wasn't intentionally dark, perhaps, but there is this sort of darkness in the productions or atmosphere around it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, we kind of get numb to the to the atmospherics around the record. You know, we got a very different perception of it, so I guess we probably don't necessarily find it as interpret it as explicitly dark, but you know, if you come at it from a neutral point of view, I totally understand why that is the overriding feeling. And yeah, I think it's an interesting point. You know, it's kind of like I don't necessarily know if these guys set out to make an explicitly dark record, but yeah, the atmosphere around it and the way that it makes you feel is probably more that way inclined. So maybe that's why we gravitate towards it. But I guess I wanted to kind of bring up the early kind of, you know, atmospheric side of it, which is evident in huge artists like Shadow's first, you know, DJ Shadow's first record, through down to more, you know, more obscure parts of that sound, which were maybe Jazz Fudge and Vadim and things like that. It was really about atmosphere, and that's what struck us. So, yeah, this record is a good example of that. I think. Really.
Yeah, should we listen to it a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Parole violating fugitives on the run, son. Live by the gun, son. Die by the gun, son. We can make it happen if we want to. Take to get that ass quick if they really want you.
Capone, you stay on street and keep the cipher complete. 2-5 circle, caught you snitching now, we hurt you fake Scarface. Coming out your mouth for a loop, he think he thugging it, Ike smugging it, cause he drugging it. We're rap blue, I still shoot, axe I rap. You better bust back, keep it like that, real fact. My life revolve around gat. The heat is guard me like bodyguard. TNT, ESPN, CNN, we East bring 10. Stick 'em up and break when. Scion, little Bion, he up and try on. Pump C-Root, run through, yo guard you. I got guard you, for him and you. Great tape, leave his mouth tape. I eliminate, news on BT. Got pictures of me, and Killer Kai, the FBI. Scan the blocks, use photography. Want me and my team out the country. Chicago, ship the cargo, back to Fajardo, NPR. Kid, I came home on my CR. Crisis, 252, we rock ISIS. Castro, castrate, put the bogey out in his face. Leave him straight, you fake nigga, move fake. And left rack, we regulate. What?
Yeah. Parole violating fugitives on the run, son. Live by the gun, son. Die by the gun, son. We can make it happen if we want to. Take to get that ass quick if they really want you.
Gaddafi, LIC, that old fly shit. Coming from the bridge, Kuwait, do or die shit. Jose Luis in Iraq, recognize it. You get laced before the Jakes realize it. Gorilla form all in your dorm, don't be surprised, kid. Weak trick, go ahead and snitch like your man did. War report, cut your life short. Babe Ruth niggas ain't ready for blood sport. Yo, we masked up, pointing the heat, duct taping her. Gag her mouth so she can't scream, starving the ear. Camcorder, you won't miss it cause we taping her. Ripping her. FedEx, you got the tape next day in the mail. Now you organize a team with gats ready to bail, but you want 80. My reaction's 360. You ass betting, know where I be, so come get me. Gaddafi, gun play, Hardy Clay, use illegal aid, trying to go to trial with a DA. What?
So I mean, of all the records that you were sort of buying around that time or were into, and why that record specifically? Was it just the first one that came to hand?
The reason actually why I wanted to play this one is because it's one that we found recently when we were going back to that period. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's kind of, you know, music discovery is something that always dictates what we do.
Yeah.
You know, like what we're into, like what little pockets or areas around a particular time really impact on the music that comes out. You know, it's a fundamental part of how we get inspiration. Mm-hmm. Like for a lot of artists, but you know, perhaps some are more in a musical bubble, whereas we like to sort of really use that as inspiration and try and find similarities. So, you know, it was going back to that, and we're always digging. Mm-hmm. So there's always like a pretty feverish, like trying to find new stuff.
Yeah.
And going back to that period, there's obviously loads of stuff that we knew. A lot of the time, the best stuff's the most well-known stuff, yeah. Obviously. So, you know, to find a little nugget of a tune that you haven't heard before, but is in the same style as what you always loved. Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting, and
it's kind of like coming to it with fresh ears.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just nice to always think there's always a little extra, you know, information or knowledge or understanding of a genre or a style that you can get out of it. So that's why I chose that one.
Cool. And then I saw you kind of just picked up a basic channel record to play next.
Yeah, it's rhythm and sound, music after all.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of production, like rhythm and sound's got to be a big influence for a lot of people, especially in, you know, sort of dance music or techno. But I mean, why for you specifically would you say?
I mean, obviously the production, the bass, and like what Mark and Estes and Moritz van Oswald do with these records, the space and the bass, the production, like, is a sort of massive influence when you can the spectrum they kind of get and the weight behind it.
It's such a balanced sound.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it just feels so luxurious. It's this kind of, you know, it's like minimal music, you know, it's incredibly minimal music done to a very specific specification, and it's just delivered. It's different. You would never want to use the word perfection when it comes to art, I guess, but at the same time, for us, it's difficult for us to think.
You don't know how you could really top
what
they do.
And I mean, similarly to like hip hop production as well, it's that sort of knowing how to work around the vocal and what's going to like sit well with the vocal.
Yeah.
A lot of their influence comes from, you know,
That's
how
right.
producers work with reggae artists. And I think that is a big part of what they did. I mean, is that something you guys have ever thought about doing?
Working with vocalists. I mean, I think every instrumental producer always thinks about it, especially having been brought up, you know, having loved, you know, hip hop and dub and reggae so much. Yeah, absolutely. We totally think about it, but it's like, you know, for another project.
Yeah. It's also like that's part of our challenge, is like without a vocal, something that leads a record, you have to, you know, compositionally, you have to tell a story in other ways. You have to find other ways to lead the listener through a track.
Yeah. I think a lot of those records as well, you know, the instrumentals definitely stand up for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell a story of their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I mean, you know, with the way that these guys make records, you get lost in them. You know, the idea is not to be particularly led. You know, there's the skill they've managed to create is to remove the vocal and make you get lost in that record in a very, you know, European techno-orientated way, which is basically changing the concept very, very gently and very, very skillfully, changing the context and the concept in which you're really kind of, you know, listening and consuming really what is, in some respects, dub. And that's, again, what is so attractive is they've basically taken two things and blended them so seamlessly and perfectly for you to feel like that combination is sort of inherent, whereas it wasn't. You know, it's not inherent to combine techno with dub music. You know, that's not, you know, but it's that.
They've done it with you know, it's the balance of the two. None, one doesn't outweigh the other.
Yeah, that was a real influence. It's just like, how can we put a number of influences that we're taking for this record and make them sit seamlessly, so they all feel like they should be in a room together. Which is kind of what this feels like. You know, it feels like dub techno and dub were there. You know, we're made to be together, but it's really only them that provided that level of understanding, I guess.
Cool. Let's really get into a little bit of it.
Yeah.
That would take some time still, we have to go through. When we look one thing, we have one. This thing, surely I would take this song, man. Music of the room. Some try to stop the music running as well, still. Nah, no. Every time. Music of the room. I know what I'm saying. Things not always because the way you want them. When gone from me out now. Sometimes I wonder. The music of the room. Music of the room. Gotta play the music every day, you know what I mean? Music of the room.
Yeah, I think you can totally get lost in those records for a really long time. There's a few sort of mixes that I've come across that are all basic channel, and you can just sort of like listen to them all day, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, there's never like, you don't have to be a start and an ending. Like,
and not get bored of it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's skillful. Like, very skillful.
Yeah. Cool, so where do you want to take it next?
Let's have a look.
I mean, is there a record that you were listening to a lot around the time you started making the album, or?
There isn't a particular record. As I said, we went back to listening to a very much more loop-based music, kind of dance music, and beats, I guess, if you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
We were always listening to grime. We never stopped listening to it. It's something I've been buying for 10 years or so now, and it's in this for the particular record we wanted to go back to garage and grime really, and because we really wanted to use rhythm a lot in a lot of a stronger sense than we did with the previous record. We were kind of sort of, jungle's obviously something which that's been a big influence atmospherically, and perhaps rhythmically. It came out in the last record a lot more sort of delayed bits of percussion and things that kind of intimate that double time franticness that jungle has. And I think we wanted to go back, to the kick and the snare, and try and sort of see how we could change what we were doing to incorporate that and develop it a little bit. In the first record, it sounds stupid, but we stayed away from snares quite a lot, just because we kind of wanted something a bit more immersive. But yeah, this time we wanted to see how we could make that very simple combination of kick, snare, bass, and maybe a little bit of atmospheric that obviously is present in hip hop that grime's a big part of as well. So yeah, we listened to a lot of contemporary stuff, obviously, but when we've got a reasonable collection of it, been buying it for a long time. So yeah, delve back into it and sort of we're playing a lot of stuff. I mean, this is a tune from the Black Ops label, which we absolutely love. Johnny Cash obviously is the biggest recording artist for it, but yeah, got a lot of those records. But this is just a particular one that played out a lot. It's just got that balance of like aggression and emotion that grime is so satisfying. It's just got that. It's got that attack basically, and we were listening to a lot of music and sort of around the time of the first record that was much more, as I said before, immersive and kind of a little bit more, not cerebral is the wrong word, but you kind of drifted into it, and perhaps it was a bit more epic or whatever. And grime feels very real. It feels very real time. It feels very sort of in the moment. There's a lot of energy to it, which we kind of wanted to find again. We kind of wanted to experiment with. So this is just a really amazing example of grime around sort of 2005, 2006, and of our collection. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, around that sort of time when it was all coming out, where were you picking up a lot of it or hearing a lot of it?
Uptown. Yeah. I went to Uptown Records in 2005, I think. And I went up there because I was in Brighton at the time. And I went up there to buy garage. I went to London to buy garage because you couldn't really buy it really that much in Brighton. And going on little pilgrimages to places that sort of are responsible for a sound or whatever has always been something I've done. We always like it. We're always buying records when we travel. So the idea of travelling up to somewhere to find the sound that you were looking for is always it was always nice. So I went up to buy a garage. And I went to Black Market, which was just over the road from Uptown, and kind of sort of stood at the back a little bit and listened to what was going on. But there was loads of people, so I was like, I'll come back in a bit. And I went out, and then I saw this shop called Uptown, which I'd never heard of before. and it was downstairs, it's just a street over. I went downstairs and just saw this wall of white labels, which, you know, for a record collector is just the most exciting thing you can see. Like, you know, there's all these records, you've got no idea what they are. And, you know, they had a nice selection of garage, but a lot of the garage stuff was obviously reissues. At the time, I wasn't really that clued up as to how garage had progressed.
Yeah.
To, you know, much, I guess. I'd been buying techno a lot for a long period of time and always kept my hand in with garage, but never sort of, you know, really explored it. And yeah, I went to Uptown and he gave me a stack of these records, and I didn't know what to make of it. I really, you know, first time hearing grime, I bought this tune called What by Wonder, which is nowadays obviously really well known, but I brought it home, and I think we just sort of sat there trying to work out what the fuck this was. Like,
and there's this sort of implied double time with just those hats, which is enough, but
yeah, it was just sort of like deep and weird and sort of stretched, and just like we just couldn't. It was really difficult to sort of get your head around it, which was just the most exciting thing. You know, it's like we grew up, and I think obviously jungle was kicking off. Like the major developments within bass music had probably kind of happened to a certain degree as we were growing up, and then perhaps we moved away from it for a period of time to really go into techno and house music for quite a while. And so like to come back to have the luck to come back into garage and UK and London bass music at the time when this new genre had changed was just, couldn't believe it. You know, we've been buying hardcore for a long time. Hardcore was this incredible, you know, out of the boot of the car, press it, get rid of it. You know what I mean? It had this amazing, freedom to it, and it wasn't necessarily freedom built on, you know, the excellence of fidelity, but it was, you know, there's still, when you listen to those records, you get the rush of it being produced quickly and the inventiveness quick.
Similarly to grime in a lot of sort of ways.
That's what I mean.
Just sort of described. I mean, if you line them up next to each other, it'd be quite hard to say they sound exactly the same. But in terms of like where it was coming from, how quickly it was coming out at the time, how quickly it was produced, how quickly sort of ideas were sort of forming in this genre.
Exactly, and you know, the wall of whites that some of them probably produced on PlayStations, Fruity Loops, you know, quite low grade, perhaps in some respects, low grade production techniques. You know, it was just like, it's just like this flowering of, you know, experimental and creative music that was still based upon the things that we loved, which is, you know, bass, kick, snare, loop, a little sample that loops around, you know, that loops basically. So, yeah, it was amazing.
Cool. Should we get into it a little bit?
Yeah, do it.
Cool.
45?
Probably, yeah.
Black Operation.
I mean, you've got another grime record you want to play. I mean, how would you say elements of this has come through in the new record?
Elements is of
sort of like that record and
okay.
in general, do you think?
Well, mainly percussively. We kind of, with garage and with grime, we kind of tried to take the kind of off hat. I don't know how you describe it in this.
Snap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Front foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of sometimes call it a bump or front foot or a kind of
propulsiveness.
That's right. Yeah. So that was basically, we tried to replicate that in the percussion in a way that, as I mentioned about grime, inspired a bit more of a real-time feeling, less of a sort of retrospective or kind of epic overview of a scenario, a bit more real-time and a bit more in the moment.
Yeah, immediacy really. It's like the aggression that's in those claps and grime as well, with snares and the bass. It's just like, it's a sort of attack.
And we were sort of talking earlier about you've just started doing a slightly different live show with a live drummer, basically.
Yeah.
Do you think that's sort of part of the reason that you've opted for that instead of a laptop?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you kind of, you just want to. It was just a desire to change the format of what we were doing. It's like we loved what we did before. We loved the the building of worlds and the kind of overarching epic, transcendent quality of trying to build music that way. But actually, we wanted to explore a new stage and a new way of perhaps communicating with the audience, especially with the live show. I mean, previously, before, we're kind of we're behind a laptop and gear and sort of quite removed, and this was a chance to try and create more of an instantaneous and a kind of buzz around creating music live in a way, if you
Cool. So what's the other record you got lined up?
This is J Sweet, Road Angel. Obviously similar kind of time, but a very different style of record. A lot more space in this one. The previous tune is very kind of constricted, very dense, and uses all of the things that we were talking about previously, with percussion being an attack. This is a lot more space in it. Obviously, like in the lineage, you could probably see the weightless guys like Mum Dance and Logos, and taking the kind of space that was inherent in some of these records, stretching it out and doing amazing things with it. Obviously got great interest and respect for those guys, but this is probably a record that reflects that, the early stages of that to us. And space has always been a big part of the way we produce music. It's a big part of how and when to put a sound is something we spend a lot of time deliberating on. And
Ever any arguments?
No, it's between us.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. Not really.
No.
I mean, it's amazing the amount of time we spend together and the amount of time, the amount of time we spend making musical decisions, and it's rare that we have what would be classed as a conflict.
Yeah. I sort of, whenever I spoke to people, especially when they produce collaboratively, it always seems like they find it easier to produce that way, because instead of one person trying to figure out a decision, it becomes a conversation.
It's a dialogue, exactly.
And then it's sort of like, it's not exactly what one person wanted, but it's easier to sort of be like, oh, this is all right, and then this is okay, and then it'll actually get stuff done. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're lucky enough that we've got to the point now where our tastes have locked in so much. We've known each other since we were 16. Both probably started buying records properly when it's like 15, 16. So really our entire lives of like discovering the music that we're still into, I guess, has been together. So it's, luckily there is such crossover now that it just doesn't, the decision that, if there is a decision like for an evening where I'm like, I think this is right, or he's like, I think this is right, like, even if you get to the end of the day and there's that kind of like slight, little grumble or whatever, when you get up the next day, and if you listen back to, we like to listen back to stuff like separately in different environments. So if I have to go to work or whatever, I'll take it and just listen to it on my headphones, or Tom will listen to it at home or whatever. And you almost 99.9% of the time, once you've had that listen, you'll both come back the next morning and go,
Yeah.
You know exactly who was wrong or who was right, and the one person sticks their hand up, goes, yeah, that was right, and off we go. It's that simple, really.
Cool. Let's get into a little bit, Jason.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Do the honours. Talking about how when you kind of first came across grime, you were mainly sort of looking for garage records. I mean, are there any examples of that sort of fed into the album at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Garage is definitely a big was a big influence, probably percussively, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at that sort of time, were you guys producing as well?
At that time.
Which time? When we were buying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of... But then at that time, you know, when you're hearing new things, your initial kind of things I want to understand, you know, when you're making it as well. So you're kind of emulating things because you're excited by them.
Yeah.
I mean, we never put anything out because it was just like, well, didn't really feel like we were excited by these tunes, but it wasn't really our voice.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah. We got we both got an old dub plate that we cut. We each cut one dub plate of our own tunes around that time.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That's not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's not much to listen to be honest. But it was a fun time. It was kind of a time, as Tom says, where you're emulating and you're kind of really excited. But I don't necessarily think we made anything of real worth. You know what I mean?
So what have you sort of picked up?
This is a track called Raw by GTK. It's the instrumental side. But this is an example of the kind of, I mean, this was kind of obviously veering from garage towards grime, that kind of era, but it's percussively like is sort of influential for us in the kind of what we talked about earlier, the sort of snap and the offbeat.
Yeah. Cool. Talking about how like the melting pot of ideas or sounds that's gone into the album's pretty diverse. I mean, up to now it's been fairly sort of electronic, might you say, or certainly sort of loop based and.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to talk about the other side of influences?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the first record is you know, always going to have to reference the first one, but the first record was really influenced by, you know, we've been buying dance music, as I say, since we were probably like 15, you know, a long time, been through, like, you know, every genre, house, techno, garage, you know, jungle, like, you know, so many different areas of it. And it was really only, you know, around sort of 10 years ago that we started to really get into bands or, you know, the music that was, in, you know, part of maybe sometimes more abstract than a traditional band structure, but yeah, that kind of music. And when we made the first record, you know, we just discovered doom metal, we just discovered drone, we just discovered, you know, modern classical and
avant-garde.
Yeah, all those areas, which was amazing. And we were just like, well, how can we put these two things together? Because we saw similarities and, you know, connections production-wise, like naturally. And we were like, oh, there's some really exciting things that we want to try and sort of, yeah, put together, I guess. And when we came to make, to start making the second record, that desire is kind of still there. Mm-hmm. But obviously we'd put the genres that we'd put together before. So, and we're always buying music, and as I say, we're always digging and, you know, exploring music. So we kind of wanted to do that again. We wanted to take what we were listening to and where we'd got to in our exploration, forward and try and make something new out of these new interests. And as a natural progression from less coherent, the introduction to band or metal or what band music or metal or rock or however you want to call it, came through quite an abstract and quite reduced form. So we would originally, we would be listening to records that had reduced that form to a couple of sounds, so that, as kind of people that didn't understand those genres that well, we could get into, because there wasn't too much around it. It's very minimal. As I say, we always like minimal music. But as we went through those genres, obviously you get more used to hearing them, and you get used to more hearing the elements and the timbres and the ideas which are contained within them. So what that meant is that we kind of, branched out and started to consume stuff that was perhaps more traditional band, or I don't know if rock format's the right way to put it, but and really we kind of ended up listening to US hardcore, so the original US hardcore, and obviously post-hardcore and post-rock and those kind of areas, and it was just exciting. It's always exciting when you come across a new genre, or a genre that I was well aware of. We knew about it, but we just never had access to it. And in this world, obviously these days, you've got access to every kind of music, every kind of genre. You can go on Discogs, you can see the whole discography. You don't have to search in the same way that you did. But having said that, it still means that you completely overlook, just by the very nature of your time, you're always overlooking, even if they're very explicit or well-known genres, there's some that you've just got no idea about. We might have known the names of the bands or whatever, but we didn't really understand the music or feel the music. And it's like anyone, when you're really into something, it means you have to close yourself off to other things. So we closed ourselves off to it, obviously just. But we found ourselves getting into, obviously, the really big bands like Fugazi and like Shellac, producer Steve Albini in general, and we kind of got into that music and got excited by it, and got excited by the fact that we were excited by it. It's kind of interesting when you kind of both start to be like, oh wow, yeah, man, that's, I'm really into that side of it. But obviously we come from a very kind of abstract angle from it. The things that we were looking at were probably the production techniques and the styles. So we saw a huge similarity between kind of the sort of rigid minimalism of Albini as an example, with the rigid minimalism of Basic Channel. And actually sonically, if you listen to those records, there's real sonic similarities. There's not these kind of like big lush periods. It's very stripped. It's drum, it's bass, it's straight, hard with Albini, for example. It's very raw guitar. Like we started to make all these connections again, and that obviously was one way in which we started to interpret it. But then we also started looking at the rhythm side of it, and we started to realise they were using obviously the rhythm sections, the bass and the drums, and we started to think of how the attack and the real-time nature of what they were doing was really exciting. And we kind of saw similarities with that with grime. Your massive kick on the one and then a harsh snare. So we started to see the way that we, in our own minds, maybe not in anyone else's, I don't know, but we started to see those connections, and it was really exciting. And it was like, okay, how can we put these things together to try and make a language? How can we make them talk to each other? Because we're pretty sure that there are similarities, but we wanted to kind of work out how to express our ideas about the combinations of the two, I guess.
Cool. Should we get into it a little later?
Yeah.
What's this you've got lined up?
This is a band called Uzeda, which is an Italian band actually, but it's produced by Steve Albini, obviously, from what I've just said. It's probably maybe a little bit less well known than obviously his own band Shellac and some of the other enormous bands that he's obviously produced over the years. But this was, I don't know, I actually can't remember how we came across this record. I think it was just digging on the internet.
I think we thought it was only a CD, and then found out it did do pressing on it.
Yeah, that's how our mind works, to be honest, man.
It's proper CD, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, old digger's mentality. But yeah, it was like, you'll hear it in a second, but it's an incredibly minimal, repetitive record, and it was one we were like, oh, okay, there is minimal repetition. Obviously, we'd heard that in New York in the late 70s, early 80s, Glenn Branca, Reith Chatham, that kind of idea of repetition with guitars. And it was really the idea of that repetition which removes the huge rock riff. It changes that perception of what that big verse, chorus, verse, rock attitude is to something being a bit more akin to what we were in, where we were coming from, which is probably less of a kind of like big balls out rock attitude, more of a kind of like interest in the textures, I guess, themselves.
Cool.
So
Should we
yeah.
give it a little listen?
It's a new year. And this place is so wide. It comes to me and asks what size is asking. What size? And he replies, what size? Again, what size? And I'm confused. I'm looking for the way on. For all the day. For all the day. I spent an income with a big smile and asked what size.
where do you want to take it next, or we've got a little pile of records that you're working through. What jumps out next to you?
Well, I mean, it's another Albini record again, but yeah, a little bit different. The tension in it's created a little bit differently, but it's probably a bit more raucous. It's a Raime record, but I kind of wanted to play it, I guess, because this was probably one of the first of this kind of area of music that kind of switched us on and kind of went, okay.
The clarity in it as well, just the textures of the sound and the clarity of the drums and the composition, the space in it.
Yeah, and yeah, this is definitely more. This is a very aggressive. There's very aggressive drops in this record, which is again like trying to see where we can take where it influenced, trying to balance the way that you sit in. We've talked about where you sit in Basic Channel as an example, that repetitive loop-based structure, which is very much about hypnosis and very much about sort of slowly sinking into it. But actually we wanted to try and work out how to combine a very front foot, aggressive on the one punch with and balance those two so there was a relationship between them, so they talked to each other a little bit, so they didn't dominate each other, because like over the years, I guess, like the combination of dance music and rock music in a way has been a dialogue that's been going on for ages, and there's some amazing examples, or bass influenced music, some amazing examples. Obviously, like Pills is one that springs to mind. You've got the amazing bass lines to Jar Wobble, and then you've got that guitar that screeches over the top, and it's a really amazing combination of those kind of two different attitudes working together. And then over the years, that dialogue gets more explicit or less explicit, but I guess we kind of wanted to try and have a go at updating that dialogue and being like, all right, well, what would it feel like if a very contemporary UK-based sound, which for us is not only grime because we've always been interested in it, but obviously in a contemporary sense, it's a very powerful form of UK-based music. And what would it sound like if we tried to put guitars and bass together again? But in 2015-16, so that was kind of where this desirable path kind of came from, and this record was kind of a big influence in that.
Should we stick a look at?
But don't. When I
So I think we're sort of running out of time. I mean, we've probably got time for one more. Is there
Yeah,
more
sure.
we will squeeze in? And what is it?
The record is by a band called No Trend. It's kind of a result of the way our mentality works. Obviously, you know, we got into these kind of bands, and then we just wanted to carry on trying to find the outer edges, I guess, of this area of music. And by this area of music, I kind of mean everything from US hard, that kind of late, probably 1980 US hardcore, into 79, 80 US hardcore onwards, really, in America. And we kind of wanted just to keep digging and kind of find, as I said, the outer edges and the weirder, perhaps more obscure bits, because again, that's how our minds work. And this is a record that we came across. I think it was probably online again, digging again online. So not in a record shop or anything, but you know, there's sort of sessions where you just keep on going through YouTube for hours and hours on end. And came out with this record, and it's just a good example of kind of like the same kind of similar kind of like sonically a similar kind of sound, but perhaps a little bit more guitar in it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, and the sort of sound of the guitar as well. I mean, obviously it's a rock record, but it was interesting to us to see how the sentiment comes out through the guitar.
Yeah.
And for us to, this time round, to use the guitar to kind of get across ideas, but to not tip over into rock. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like what Joe said earlier, is like using guitar in a repetitious way, like that late 70s, like Glenn Branca kind of thing, where you can get a message across, but you're not, if the balance between, for us in this record, between rock and electronic,
yes,
if it's ever out of sync, then it kind of falls down.
Yeah, it becomes one or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right in the middle.
it was very tricky to find that balance. It took us a long time, and we scrapped a lot of tracks along the way, because we weren't happy with how the balance worked.
Mm-hmm.
The guitar kind of like had to be simultaneously, obviously a guitar, but it also had to be percussive.
Yeah.
And it also just had to sit below the radar, so like it meant the same thing as a snare meant, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, you know, within dance music, everything is there to aid the rhythmical progression of a record. It's not really to sort of stand out from the crowd and say I'm the thing you should listen to, which is kind of what we tried to do with the guitar. And you know, even the riffs that Tom was doing, it was sometimes they would become too riffy. You know, so we'd reduce the amount of notes, or we'd reduce the amount of what it is, and try and get it down to its bare essentials.
Yeah.
So
turning everything into a sort of rhythmical element, basically.
Yeah, and everything was reduced. You know, we're reducing the instrumentation. It's like we want to say this with the most minimal kind of, you know, it's like drums, bass, guitar. It's like, but still try and get across these ideas of tension and like, with very, even like musically, like reducing the, you know, like the riffs are like two note. There's a polarity between them, you know, the distress when two notes collide. It's like even reducing, that.
Yeah, because we saw, so for example, going back to the grime influence, you know, grime melodies are usually 2 or 3 notes.
Yeah.
You know, really quick, like, you know, like that kind of thing, and that repeated, and it just gets that momentum because it's a very sort of dry, sort of straightforward way and jarring way of creating a rhythm. So that's what we did with the guitar. We were just like, okay, well, let's reduce it to the same kind of concept, the same 3-note refrain or a same 3-note repetition, which, you know, it inspires that kind of aggression and that kind of move forward. But, you know, we wanted to change it so that it wasn't a replication. You know, we needed to bring our sentiment, our atmospheric sentiment, because that's who we are, you know, and that's kind of what the kind of music we make. So kind of put all those things together, I guess.
Yeah, and also with the guitar, you hear it first and your ear goes, yeah, that's a guitar. But hopefully as the tracks, it kind of buries in and you kind of accept it as part of a whole. Like, and obviously again, this kind of thing of balance, it doesn't lead it, and it sits in the balance, the mix.
Cool. Let's give it a little listen.
Yeah.
They met during social interaction in algebra class. She was expressionless at first, but then smiled to indicate submission. He rearranged his facial features to appear friendly. After determining that their popularity status was comparable, they decided that a relationship would be mutually beneficial. They were careful to be seen together at all the local fast food franchises. He had a stylized speech pattern. She used all the newest slang. When they talked on the telephone, they had trouble generating conversation stimulus. They programmed arguments into their relationship to make their lives seem meaningful. They could act really mad, happy, or even sad, according to the current prefabricated social circumstances. He had programmed his personality to conform to adolescent trends. She had synthesized her emotions based on accepted teen sexual characteristics. They had copied all aspects of their behavior from what they had observed in society. At the school dance, they were careful to exhibit only behavior which had been approved by their peer group. They were killed in an auto wreck as they were driving to and fro. After drinking 2 beers, he was pretending to be drunk. While the local popular radio station played the newest pre-designated youth-oriented top 40 hits, he was decapitated in an explosion of flame and glass fragments. Her body was found crushed into the dashboard. A Minicam report described them as fine youngsters. They never got a chance.
Cool, well that's about the end of it for today. Thanks very much, guys. That was
Pleasure.
great.
Thanks for coming too.
I've just been sort of like locked away from the world.
Yeah.
Listening to records all afternoon. It's been great. Cool, we'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.